Hello, I am Alberto Grignolo, Editor-in-Chief of DIA Global Forum, and today I'm very pleased to welcome our colleague Dominique Lagrave, and we are in the DIA Media booth at the DIA Global Annual Meeting 2022 here in Chicago. A wonderful time, and it's a very warm day, but we're in a cool air-conditioned booth and very happy to be with you, Dominique. Dominique serves as Vice President for Regulatory Innovation at Accumulus Synergy, which is a non-profit corporation formed in 2021 to enable global real-time collaboration and data exchange and regulatory submissions between industry and health authorities. Very unique collaboration, very unique organization. So Dominique, welcome. Thank you for joining for this conversation today.
Alberto, true pleasure to be here today in this wonderful place in Chicago, and happy to be back also face-to-face and able to meet all our ex-colleagues together.
It is very nice to be together again with thousands of our best friends. That's right. So to start, Dominique, thanks. And what is the vision of Accumulus Synergy, and what do you do as Vice President of Regulatory Innovation?
So Accumulus was created about a couple of years ago, really from the vision of head of R&D of several organizations within the pharmaceutical industry, together with health authorities, with the recognition that the way we're processing submissions today and processing information, including data, has to be changed. We have evolved through the years from paper to eCTD. Now it's time to move toward more digital transformations and really support better access for drugs for patients around the globe. Really, the mission of Accumulus is to support patients to have access to potential life-saving drugs faster around the globe.
And why does this have to be changed?
Well, today, when you see, an approval in the US, we will have lag time in all of the countries. If you look at countries in Africa, the average would be 6 to 7 years after a major drug is approved in the US, which in this day and age, I don't think is acceptable. And we need to do altogether better so that we provide access to these patients much faster, potential life-saving drugs.
Would you say the pandemic has brought attention to the need to make sure that vaccines and medicines become available to the global patient population more or less at the same time?
Yeah, and I think, the pandemic, and the good side, if there's any good sides of the pandemic, is the realization that when we pull our resources together, we can do great things. And we'll be able to show that vaccines were available roughly at the same time around the globe. But this was done with a tremendous effort that is not sustainable. And this is where we believe the use of technology can help support these to be more sustainable and potentially help, again, reduce these lag times around multiple countries.
Now, you're here in Chicago and you're an active participant in the DA Global Annual Meeting. I believe you're chairing a session called Building the First Cloud-Based Submission Review Collaboration Platform. So tell us what this is about and why is it important today and presumably in the future?
So today, really for us, is to be able to bring people together and discuss the potential of cloud-based solutions. Not specifically what Accumulus is doing, but in the greater terms, how can we better collaborate together? And I'm going to be joined by two wonderful speakers. One, Jesper, joining us from the Danish health authorities, where he's going to discuss the use of clinical data, the raw clinical data in Europe, which is a major shift from what we've been using, in the past. Those data were essentially used in the US. We see that the greater needs in Europe. Mm-hmm. And also with one of our colleagues from GSK, Louise Gill, who is going to be joining us to discuss more the policy journey on how cloud-based solutions to enable collaborations can evolve in the future. As you can imagine, regulations and policies needs to be potentially changed in some of the areas to enable greater collaboration across the globe. And really, it's a policy journey they want to be able to discuss with all stakeholders.
So what collaboration are we talking about? Is submission review collaboration that is cloud-based. In practice, what does this mean for the everyday practitioner in industry who wonders, how is this going to change my life?
So the overall vision is really to be able to submit once and having health authority accessing the same informations in parallel.
At the same time?
At the same time, or similar same times. Each health authority may have different timelines depending on their regulatory processes, but really the aim is that once the information is made available, then all health authority potentially should have access to the same information and potentially able to collaborate together. A great example is Access, where 5 countries are actually sharing the review of one product.
The Access Consortium.
That is correct.
And the countries that are members of the consortium, remind us, are?
Australia, the UK, Switzerland, Singapore, and Canada.
Right.
And all of them share, in this case, a portion of the dossiers where they review together, putting all their resources together to have faster approval in all those countries.
So is your organization, Accumulus Synergy, seeking to expand that model or build on that model of the Access Consortium and expand it to
Yes.
all regulatory authorities around the world?
Right now, what we're looking at is looking at different ways collaboration happens today. So working also on Project Orbis, which is in this case scientific collaborations, purely in oncology, to help support in 8 countries, potentially again reducing these lag times between the US approval and what will lead in other countries. We're looking from an access standpoint on really work sharing. And then we have other means like the African Medicine Agency, which is grouping several countries reviewing together. So I think we're seeing more and more collaborations coming up. And we're here to support from a technology standpoint how we can help and support greater collaboration, greater transparency, while still providing a very secure platform that is of course needed when you're building that kind of solutions.
Data sharing is a hot topic these days. For example, at the opening plenary session of this DIA Global Annual Meeting, FDA Commissioner Rob Califf said, we need new models for data sharing. Does your organization plan to contribute to new models for data sharing, and in what way do you expect?
Yes, so we're looking at existing data models, right, the one they have, but also we're going to drive towards working with the right stakeholders to support harmonizations. As you know, in some areas we do have harmonization through ICH. In some areas there are still gaps, and we hope that Accumulus can play a role in help support through a single platform some level of harmonizations and supporting this data exchange in different ways, potentially leveraging standards like FHIR in order to support these transactions really from the source of information managed by therapeutics developers all the way to multiple health authorities, really building we can consider a data highway and really supporting that from the creation all the way up to the reviewing and the analytical at health authorities.
Will divergent data privacy regulations in different geographies stand in the way of this? For example, the GDPR in Europe is very strict. The US doesn't have anything quite like that, and other geographies lack such mechanisms. Is this going to be a barrier?
Alberto, this is a great question. When we started the Accumulus journey, when we look up at all the regulations that existed, we knew that cybersecurity, that privacy is going to be something very important for us, as we're going to put together informations that comes from various countries around the world together with innovators, informations. So we spend a lot of time mapping actually 1,500 different requirements around the globe. This is the first time that was done to see how we can build a platform to the highest watermark. So we look at all the different countries in terms of cybersecurities, in terms of data privacy, and we're building the platform to the highest mark. And now we're engaging each authority one by one in order to ensure that our approaches meet or exceed their requirements. Those requirements were never meant to help support sharing and collaborations. They're really meant to support the security and sovereignty of each country. So we're trailblazing in some of the areas, and we're highly engaged with a lot of health authorities that really want to be able to change the way and the paradigm around how we can collaborate better.
Do you anticipate that perhaps new legislation may be necessary in certain countries, in certain geographies, to enable the work that you're seeking to do to become a reality?
I think so, and this is part of the policy journey, right? Again, I think all those rules and regulations were built to ensure security and sovereignty in countries. Now we're seeing more and more collaboration and the need for it. So we might see some legal barriers in some of the areas that potentially should evolve through time. And we hope we can help foster the discussion between health authorities and also with the right players within our industry.
All right. Let me switch a little bit to a focus on digital per se. We know that we have really moved from a model of drug development going forward based on a series of go, no-go decisions to a multi-stakeholder or all-stakeholder model where everybody has something to say. And digital technology is really contributing to this by providing access to information around clinical delivery and clinical research data. And so electronic health records are helping to inform the research cycle. Clinical trials obviously benefit from access to electronic health records, real-world evidence. Product labeling is also informed by digital. Patients have a lot to say these days, increasingly so, about the design of clinical trials and the implementation of clinical trials, including decentralized trials that depend heavily on digital technology. Payers, HTAs, health technology agencies, also weighing in. They need digital to support them. So how does all of this digital world that's evolving and creating, I would call it a digital virtuous loop of going from research to patient and back to research. How does this fold into what Accumulus Synergy is seeking to do, or is it the other way around, that you're fitting your organization into this evolving digital world? How do the two interplay?
We see ourselves as an enabler. We're not here to dictate how people should work together, but we're here to provide a set of technologies and the platforms that will enable those collaborations when and if necessary. We intend to be fully agnostic with regards to data standards and how the information is processed. And really our aim is to democratize access to the platform. So down the road, we can think about having HTA's access to the information at early stages. We're starting to work with patient advocacy groups as well, work on what role they can play in there, working with WHO, the Gates Foundations, really having a broad stroke around who needs to have access to these informations and to support what purposes. So really taking a very broad areas and looking at ways we can improve access to the information that is needed to make better decisions, irrelevant of the purpose in the end.
What is your plan for ensuring that the ecosystem accepts this notion, this concept of data sharing, a single platform, etc.? Will there be opponents? Will there be alternatives? Will there be other players who say, well, you can do your thing, but we will do something different? And then we would all be confused as to, well, where do we go?
For us, part of my role at Accumulus is to support adoption. So my day-to-day role is to work with authorities, works with companies that work with us in order to ensure that we can roll it out and it will be used. And on this journey, part of it is change management. People have processes today that are comfortable with, like in any organizations. So change management play very intricate roles in convincing people that there is better ways of doing things, and it's part of the adoption journey. With regards to other platforms, it is important that actually we're not the only one. It's important that people develop different technology, different approaches, really to help support the needs of the patients. We're one of the players, we're well advanced in that journey, but this is important that we keep all the different options towards the same end, which is serving patients globally in mind as we're working towards that.
Maybe it's important to underscore who is sponsoring Accumulus Synergy. It's a non-profit organization, but it has sponsors. Can you comment on who the sponsors are?
Of course. The current sponsors, we have 11 sponsors. Most of them are the largest pharmaceutical companies who have brought not only financial support, but more importantly, they have provided expertise and SMEs. I can speak to that because I was one of them. When I started to work with Accumulus, I came from the sponsor organizations, which I was assigned to work for Accumulus, like many of my colleagues at Accumulus, giving their time essentially to support the project. And I love so much what Accumulus was doing that actually I decided not to join full time and continue to drive and work with all those partners in the ecosystem to build this first of its kind platform. Now, we now starting to the point we actually want to expand access to the platform beyond 11 original sponsors, and really starting to build together some advisory groups. There will be a vast representations of what our industry is and the diversity it represents, from drug innovators to generics company to CROs and the different health authorities around the globe as well, including WHO and Gates Foundations. We have to be inclusive. If you want to be democratized and bringing access, we have to broaden our scopes that we have today.
That sounds logical because, of course, as you mentioned, the sponsors are some of the biggest pharma companies in the world. Well, there are hundreds, maybe thousands of smaller emerging companies that, if this platform is broadly accepted by the authorities, these smaller companies will somehow learn how to play. Will have to learn how to play and how to make their submissions and so on. So they too need to somehow be persuaded and brought into the fold, and sort of there need to be conversations so that they feel part of the process.
Exactly,
right?
and some of the conversations we started with bio, for example, and pharma and the FPA and others that represents those other pharmaceutical companies in there. And also we're going to work on advisory capacity with several of those that represents rare disease, that represents gene therapies, etc., to have something very diverse that can provide and pressure test some of the concepts we're having, and so that it's applicable to everybody and everyone within our industry.
That's right. From a practical point of view, just imagining how a work day might look like. So Presumably a submission, a marketing application will be uploaded to a portal, and various regulatory authorities will be able to look at it at the same time. Is this somewhat similar to the EU portal for the EU clinical trial regulation for clinical trial applications?
So
is similar to that?
I think in the long term, yes. What we're currently building is we're enhancing the submission process. So obviously today, the right way of doing submission is putting it through the ECTD gateway, for example, the ESG gateway in the US and other gateways. We don't intend, of course, at day one to replace these processes because this will require changing guidance and et cetera. What we hope to be able to achieve is enhance the platform with the richness of the data and the capacity to collaborate. When you're looking at Orbis, we're going to enable health authorities to privately collaborate on the review in the back end, be able to exchange health authority questions, share responses, and be able really to help them support their discussions and hopefully accelerate to some extent potentially the reviews in this area.
Well, will the questions from, say, the FDA to the sponsor in the portal be visible to, say, EMA and MPA and PMDA at the same time?
So if there's an agreement between the health authorities, again, ensuring privacy, then the answer is yes. The platform enables those health authorities to see each other's questions. It will be the case on the Project Orbis, for example, where all the members participating in there will see live draft questions being drafted by one health authorities or another prior to being shared to the sponsor organization.
And all authorities will be seeing the responses of the sponsor to the questions from any one of those authorities. So all of them would see the responses at the same time.
In these agreements, yes, as well. And one area that we're trying to move forward, which I think we can achieve actually, is building the concept of a health authority questions library. Providing greater transparency, in this case, health authorities will have the capacity to see all the health authority questions and the responses provided, which we hope in terms of reliance will help speed up a lot the processes in which those countries may review applications, having access to already all the back and forth that has been between health authorities and sponsor organizations in other countries. So that's an area we've been working a lot with multiple health authorities, with therapeutic developers, and also working with trade associations on changing and being, providing more transparency to these processes.
Do you envision a time, whatever number of years from now, where a sponsor would submit an application to 75 regulatory authorities at the same time through your portal, if that's the mechanism? Is that possible, do you think? It's envisioned? That many?
The technology, yes. From a technology standpoint, there's no limitations.
Yeah.
You can do this. I think it becomes from a regulatory and trade secrets, and there are other means that have to take into account. But in theory, technology-wise, yes, you can. You can present this information. And I think we try to move away more and more from pure PDF documents and looking at the power of the data, the digital asset, digital informations, to help enhance the review processes. So that down the road, having access to information actually earlier, not just in sequentially today when you have at the submission times, but really when they're created and made available, being exposed into the platform and enable health authorities to be able to see this information earlier, again, also will help support the type of rolling submissions, if you means, but not only for one country, but across the board as you build your set of data within the platform.
Does that mean the regulators will be able to see clinical data as they are being collected before the trial is even completed?
These have to be, looked at, but I think there's multiple milestones in which this information can be made available as the clinical trials are making progresses. So again, this is discussion we're starting to have with health authorities around the specific milestones and timing in which information could be made available much faster than they are today. You can think about database logs, for example, one of them, but also there's soft logs that sometimes happens in different stages.
Right.
That could be means for the health authority to preview the information.
Right.
So that in the end, it's not just a dump of 100 gigabyte of information. This has been previewed before, and hopeful that then the final review processes will, in this case, be slightly more efficient and leads to an approval a bit sooner for patients.
Would the need for CTD Module 2 summaries and overviews go away? Or would the authorities, do you think, still want to see summaries and overviews for convenience?
So it really depends on countries. I think if you're looking at the US is more bottom-up approach, which they want to see the data, and they may or may not read your Module 2 information. Other countries actually rely a lot on Module 2, and then confirm if, digging to module 3, 4, and 5 if they have any questions. So I think module 2 still remains very needed in most areas, but we hope to be able to enhance module 2 also by embedding data in it. One thing we're looking at to create is called the single pane of glass, which is your narrative portion, your tables and figures separated, looking like a document, but behind it, the data being embedded. Which means that if you want to reanalyze a table of figures you've seen, should you choose to do so, you can extract it and reanalyze it. Okay. So enhance the usability of module 2, while not removing the interest of being able to provide some context and analysis to support the review process.
I guess from a sponsor's point of view, it would be beneficial to think, okay, I can use one application, upload it to the portal, have 75, for example, regulatory authorities look at it at the same time, and if I, as a sponsor, answer the questions appropriately, I could get on 75 markets at the same time, benefiting that many hundreds of millions of patients at the same time.
Yes,
potentially.
That's one of the North Star for us, right? Is really to help facilitate this. There's, as you know, a lot more complex things happening behind, including supply chains and all the areas around that. But conceptually, what really we want to be able to do is to enable those parallel reviews and having health authority collaborate between each other. When you think about it, you have the same piece of information that is reviewed 75 times by 75 different health authorities. It's not a very efficient process, right? And sharing those knowledge, while of course not compromising the quality of the review and the independence of each country. I think COVID has proven us that we can do better.
I'm also wondering from a sponsor's point of view, if the sponsor submits to 75 countries to the portal and then receives questions from 75 countries at the same time and needs to reply, what are the manpower needs of the sponsor end to be able to do that?
Oh yeah, from the logistic standpoint, it's not as trivial. Technology can enable things, but then there's processes behind it. We also hope that because health authority questions will be made available sooner, that it will avoid duplications. Today, a lot of questions are duplicative. So we hope that potentially down the road, the numbers of questions asked will be a bit smaller, and therefore parallel reviews or collaborative review that's similar to what Orbis and Access actually can be expanded to other areas because it will not be bothersome anymore for companies to be able to answer those in parallel.
For companies that like to plan, and that's most companies, what's the horizon here? I mean, how soon would this become a reality in your opinion? I know it's a crystal ball, but your best guess as we sit here today.
So right now we're calling feature previews, which means that we have designed very specific features that we're able to preview and test from usability standpoint with both health authorities and therapeutic developers. Really to look at where we are from a system design perspective. Soon we're going to be moving to what we call product preview, which in this case is pre-coded system where we're going to onboard with non-real data both health authorities and sponsors so that they can do essentially play in different scenarios, which is going to be essential for adoptions, right? We want to be able to mimic processes with fake data and be able to feel everybody comfortable in how the platform is configured and used. Once we have what we call the Fedramp Certification, which is essential for us that the system can be used.
What certification? Say again?
It's called Fedramp. So Fedramp is a certification that is granted by the US government to enable a cloud solutions to be used by a federal employee.
Okay.
Which is a must-have for us in order to be able to start having, for example, the FDA using the platform. Once we have that, we'll move towards pilots. And pilots will be limited numbers of pilots to the discretion of health authorities and how much they're willing to take at the beginning before we fully launch the platforms for full democratizations. So timing-wise, we're looking to get pilots running in 2023.
Okay.
And then having then the platform made available on a greater scale, most likely at some point during 2024.
24?
Yes.
So full implementation, when? More or less?
Full, we would never be finished. Full is like...
It's a journey. It's a long journey.
It's a journey. I see the frontier is going to be to improve. But I think the initial use cases they're working on really to demonstrate collaborations, to demonstrate between health authorities, demonstrate collaboration between one sponsor and one health authorities, enabling negotiations, and demonstrate also the capacity to transfer data within the platform All the 3 use cases, we believe, going to make their way into productions in 2023 at pilot.
Okay. So pilots will be very important in all of
Pilots
this.
will be essential, right? It's how you're going to prove that first it's working, and also it has the value it's supposed to have. And then we're going to build upon those main capabilities of the platforms, really, and adding new document types, new submission types, new collaboration types, together with all our stakeholders in terms of priorities.
Interesting. Very ambitious change management. Good luck to you and the organization. You are inventing our collective future.
Thank you, Alberto.
Dominique, it's been a pleasure to speak with you today. Thank you so much for participating.
Alberto, thank you very much for having me, and looking forward to talking with you very soon.
By all means. For DIA Global Forum, I'm Alberto Grignolo. Goodbye.